I'm Billy Hollowell, and welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we bring you interviews with pastors, actors, entertainers, and other notable news figures. On today's show, we're going to be getting into some fascinating topics, but before we do, if you are not subscribing to Newsmakers, make sure you head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe right now. Give us a rating. We love 5-star reviews. This is a show where you're going to dive deep into important issues with amazing people. With no further ado, here is today's show. On today's Newsmakers, America is dealing with heartbreak after 67 people lost their lives when American Airlines Flight 5342 collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter. We are joined today by Michael Simpson. He is the friend of Bob and Lori Schrock. They were two passengers on that flight. He is here to talk about Bob and Lori, their faith, and how he is coping in the midst of tragedy. With no further ado, here is Michael. Michael, I want to thank you for joining me. I know this has been an incredibly difficult week. You had friends, Bob and Lori Schrock, who were aboard American Airlines Flight 5342. It is no secret what happened with that flight this week. I want to start just giving you a chance to tell us a little bit about Bob and Lori. Tell us who they were.
Yeah, Bob and Lori, I grew up down here in the same town that they lived in. I met Bob when I was really young. I was, 12 years old or so. And he and, a few other men in the weight room taught me how to lift weights, kept me accountable with that, and just ridiculously encouraging. That was, like I say, the weights was great, but the encouragement of having people that were, as a 12-year-old kid, having people that are adults that are taking the time to walk across the gym and encourage you and tell you good job and give you advice and do that. That's not a common thing. And it really did it made me want to keep going, made me want to come be a part. And that was, golly, we did that for, up until a few weeks ago. We'd see each other in the gym and just same old stuff. I mean, we've been doing it since I was a kid, and that was really the starting of me and Bob's relationship specifically, and just a really neat friendship that started up with that. And in our community out here, they're just they did the right thing. Well, the best definition of integrity, doing the right thing when nobody's watching. And they just did the right thing and didn't need people to know. They were very private people. He would, do good things, do right things, and try to minimalize it as much as possible. And you just don't find people like that. And I'd say that was just a really amazing character trait that both Bob and Lori had tremendously.
And, it sounds like really shaping you in a lot of ways as a young person. I mean, here you are as an adult remembering what he did for you and that relationship that started then and carried on. When these events happen, it horrifies people. It's terrifying. There's so many emotions. Even those who obviously don't know the victims are watching this, and a lot of questions. What I don't like about stories like this is that it feels like numbers and statistics and people you don't know that don't have a face or a name. And when we have these conversations, we're able to understand who these people were. And one thing about Bob and Lori is that they were Christians, right? They were people of faith, correct?
Yes. Tremendous, walked out, fruitful faith. And I was, that became a lot more apparent to me in my relationship with them, within the last, 5 to 8 years probably. Because, it'd been about a decade and a half ago now, I started working with kids from hard places with a guy that wanted to start a boys ranch and started, I'd talk with Bob and see him at the gym. I was like, hey, I'm going to go out and work with kids, which I'd say, he was an example of that. I mean, he did that with me. And so there was a lot of encouragement in that, but we really didn't talk about a lot of spiritual things at that time. It was just, a lot of good encouragements. But then, but later on, as my faith was growing and I was starting to talk about what I was learning, I was like, these are people that have a true, genuine, lived out faith. And so I remember talking with him because I was getting ready to quit my job running cranes in the oil field to come out and be a part of the ministry full time. And said, Bob, I'm getting ready to do something real crazy. I need you to talk me out of it. And he didn't really offer a lot of opinion. I mean, he's a businessman, and I like business, and so I look at a lot of things in a business light. And I was like, this Dave Ramsey would not be happy with the decision I'm getting ready to make, type of a thing. And Bob was just encouraged, like, man, it's like, is this what you feel like the Lord's wanting you to do? And I think so. It's like, well, I'm not going to tell you no. I'm not going to tell you you're dumb. I mean, there's a lot of things that the Lord's asked me to do in my life that I'm like, you know what? I don't know. That doesn't seem right, but God blesses obedience. And it was just, and that was like, okay, this is a guy that just doesn't go to church and just doesn't, say that he's a follower of Christ. There's some depth with that. And then when I did come out here and start working, one of the neatest things, one of the things I'm like, okay, this guy's just can be counted on a level that I hadn't before. We got given a piece of property out here to start our horse program working with kids, and it was gross. I mean, it was weeds 10 foot tall, 20 acres of it. I'm trying to take care of it. We don't have any money. We don't have nothing. And Bob calls me and he says, Michael, you taking a look at your pasture? I said, yes. Says, this looks pretty abysmal. Like, yeah, thank you for the encouragement. Appreciate that. And he says, Michael, I don't know how to work with kids. He says, but I know how to make things grow. You work with kids. I'll make sure your pasture looks like a golf course.
Wow.
And I'm not talking like he went and mowed it once. He invested tens of thousands of dollars over the years to give us a place that we could be really proud of. And if I'd be like, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. He didn't want to really hear it. If I'd send him a nice text, I'd get a thumbs up emoji, it was like, whatever, Mike, this is what we do. I was like, okay, I didn't have a lot of friends like that.
Yeah. Living his faith to the fullest and helping you. And again, this is a relationship that started decades before that when you're a kid, and it continued on, and you're giving us such a powerful lens into who this couple were. How are you processing all of this? Because again, when a trauma happens, when something tragic happens, it's hard enough. This is something the entire world is talking about right now. How are you dealing with the loss of these friends?
Hits and waves. Because I was talking to one of our, me and Bob's mutual friends yesterday, and best friend, and I think he said it best like that. I don't have a lot of friends, not a lot of friends like that. And he said the same thing. He's like, man, this is, you have those friends that you can call in the middle of the night, say I'm in a jam, and there would be no questions asked, say, where do you want to meet? Like he was somebody that was, if he's sitting there and, back in Maryland at his house in Maryland, I was like, dude, I need you here next week. I've got a problem. He'd be there. And, they don't make a lot of people like that, and I've got very few friends like that, and so it's more sitting there. This has been some waves that I've been going through the last few days. Like, okay, how do I make sure that I'm like that for others, because other people needed a friend like I had.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what you're doing, and I just want to highlight this again because I want to talk about Freedom Gates Boys Ranch, which you've brought up here. I want to talk about that, but I think this, and you kind of said it before, and I don't want to speak for you, but this investment in you as a 12-year-old, right? I keep going back to that because you're now investing in other young boys' lives, right? In the same way. How much do you think of what he did for you translated into that passion that God put in your heart and the moves that you took to join the ministry there at Freedom Gates?
I've never really thought about that until the last couple of days, because that's been asked. And I'm like, well, I've had a lot of people over the years encourage, and that I would say has definitely been that. And I never really put a lot of those pieces together until I'm like, wow, well, like we have a weightlifting program here at the ranch. Why? Because I know how powerful it was for me to have that program and to have people mentor me into helping me get myself better physically. that would not be the case if it wasn't for Bob and a couple other guys there at the gym that encouraged me. And I'm like, wow, my life would have been different, totally different, in some of those aspects. And again, I guess I'd sit there and say, is like, having somebody at the age that I was, at that 12, 13, well, and again, all the way through adulthood, that had no agenda, didn't need anything from me, wasn't legally required to come over and give me encouragement, and yet chose to, I that meant something, and I know that it does, and I know that that's had an impact on why I've been, do what I do.
It's life altering. I mean, it's life altering. You don't realize it. It's interesting. You don't realize when somebody does what he did for you when it's going on. You don't even realize it maybe 10 years later. It takes a long time. Here you are talking about this now. And, because of this conversation, I do want to highlight Freedom Gates Boys Ranch. You've talked a little about the work, but tell us what you're doing there, what the purpose of this ministry is so that people get a sense and where people can go to find out more.
Sure. Yeah. So, Freedom Gates out here, I met the guy that started up this place when I was 19. And he said, I want to build a place where we can go work with kids. Sorry about that. And so met him, and we started up this place out here. And what we do is we don't work with kids through foster care through the state. We work with kids directly enrolled by parents, grandparents, guardians. We get them from all over the country. And they come a lot of times, and I just call them kids from hard places. They've got hard backgrounds, abuse, neglect, broken homes, generations of brokenness and poverty and drug addiction, alcoholism. And they just, most of the time I get calls because they're just spiraling, and they're like, the zone I'd say that we try to catch is, kids that are spiraling down, but they're not in enough trouble to where the state is required to get involved. They're not in legal trouble, but they're heading that direction. And I'm like, man, Lord, how can we sit there and help make a turnaround, before the consequences get, really serious? And so in that, they come out here, and we're a residential program, so they come live out here for no less than a year and a half, sometimes up to 2 years in the program that we have. That if our goal is reconciliation back with the family, they stay here for about a year and a half to 2 years. And in that, we provide full education. We have our own education program out here, mental health services, Christ-centered mental health services, and Christ-centered education. And we run a farm and ranch program. So we have horsemanship and cattle work and trying to teach them responsibilities. We also have a trades program teaching them welding, mechanicking, just basic trade skills, plumbing, electrical. And then we also have in that our and if the goal is reconciliation back with the family, we provide family therapy, counseling monthly, training back to our parents, because a lot of times the parents that I'm talking to, they're utilizing the tools that they've got. So I'm like, okay, Lord, how can we increase their tools, and how can we breathe hope into the family so that when this family comes back together, they've got a chance of hope. And but then we also provide long-term care as well, because sometimes I get kids that just home's not a good place, not a good option. The family knows that, the kids know that. So in that case, a kid can come in here at 11, 12, 13 years old, and they'll live out here until they're adults. And we'll get them into trade school or VOTEC. Some of them have graduated, become adults, graduated, get a house here locally in the area, and continue to work for me out here at the ranch. We become home for them, and which is really cool. We love being able to offer that. And the center of our program has always been, since day one, is we know only true healing can happen with a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And we've watched so many young people just find hope and peace. So that's in a nutshell of what we do.
That's incredible. And it's amazing. And, I appreciate you having this conversation. Just as we round out to a close, how is God helping comfort you in the midst of this? And what are you hoping to leave people with? Because again, you could have stayed silent, but you are speaking on this, sharing Bob and Lori's story, who they are. What do you want to leave people with?
as soon as I heard from me and Bob's mutual friend, Mark, what had happened, within about 10 seconds, his and my conversation went to, how do people cope with what's going on without Christ? Because I know that I will see my friends again. I know based on the fruit that they had in their life and the profession from themselves that they have a relationship with Christ. They have a love for the gospel. And I believe that I know I will see my friends again. And I know that I remember talking with Bob, this has been a while back, and he said, Michael, he says, I've run with so many friends and more acquaintances, people that have so much money and so much big business, and they've got so much going on, and they're on depression and anxiety meds. They're on their whole life is just centered around their fear of losing what they have. And he says they have no idea the peace that is found when you know that none of it belongs to you. We're here for a short amount of time, and eternity is what matters. That's what Bob would tell me. And I know that that's what he would want the world to know. It's like true peace and hope can be found in a relationship with Christ. And you are here today and can be gone tomorrow. And eternity is what matters.
Wow. What a powerful line to close on. Eternity is what matters. I really appreciate you joining us, Michael. I know it's not easy to talk about this, and we just thank you for sharing what you just shared there at the end, especially. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all for today's Newsmakers. I'm Billy Hollowell. Make sure you head on over and rate this show on your favorite podcast platform. Let your friends and family know to listen as well. We have new episodes Monday through Friday on your favorite podcast platforms. You can also watch the Newsmakers TV show on the CBN News channel. That show airs once a week with 3 incredible interviews with newsmakers. Be sure to head on over and watch that, and also head over for more interviews to the CBN News YouTube channel and cbnnews.com. I'll see you again very soon for another Newsmakers.